Our assignment concept was number 2, which says most Europeans derived their livelihood from agriculture and oriented their lives around the seasons, the village, or the manor, although economic changes began to alter rural production and power. First of all, subsistence agriculture, or making just enough food to survive the day, was dominant in many areas. One of the problems with this was soil exhaustion. Soil exhaustion occurred when farmers planted too many crops that depleted nitrogen in the soil, meaning they could not plant crops in their fields anymore. Farmers fixed this with crop rotation. Crop rotation meant planting a crop in a field that would deplete the nitrogen in the soil, like wheat or grain, and afterwards planting a crop in the soil that would restore the nitrogen, like clover, beans, and potatoes. By the way, potatoes were originally considered a food for horses by Europeans, but this changed as crop rotation became popular. They quickly became a staple in a peasant's diet. The scientific revolution also had major impacts on crop rotation. It caused landowners to have to pay rent and labor services for their property. This was because scientists were interested in experimenting on fields in order to discover which crop combinations worked best for field rotation. Out of scientific revolution sprung more sophisticated and efficient forms of crop rotation, which spread to the Mediterranean and the north. However, everything was not perfect in the world of agriculture. Due to bad harvests, famine was common in Europe. Food was at an all-time low, which led to population decrease and massive diseases such as smallpox and typhoid. Prices of food began to rise, causing peasants and the poor to riot and steal from shops and their neighbors. For instance, peasants would steal bread from the shops and then sell it to their friends at a higher price. Now in Europe, two types of living conditions began to arise, that of the West and that of the East. Overall, the living conditions in the West were better than that of the Eastern Europe. Many of the people living in the West were subsistence peasants, or people who grew what they ate and built their own homes. People were also free from serfdom in Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, however, peasants were heavily taxed and they were required to work several days each week. Many peasants lost their homes and land because of this. Because of the increase in price of food, many nobles and landlords attempted to increase their profits by limiting the rights of peasants. This backfired, however, and many peasants started revolts. Peasants were also charged heavily with taxes, which did little to lighten their mood. The revolts that occurred were very minor, but it showed the nobles that they could not just forcefully take from the poor and claim it as their own as they had done in the past. The nobles had lost power in this time of agricultural change. So to sum it all up, first, subsistence agriculture was the way of living for most Europeans. Crop rotation became dominant in most areas in Europe and especially in the Mediterranean and the North. The scientific revolution had a major impact on modern agriculture, and it caused potatoes, clovers, and beans to become dominant crops. Second, bad harvests ensured an increased rate of famine, the increase in food costs, and theft in Europe. Third, two ways of living sprung up, one in the West and one in the East. The West was a better place to live in that than Eastern Europe because of taxation and limited rights. And finally, lords and nobles attempted to increase their revenue by limiting peasants' rights, which led to riots. These changes shaped the agricultural way of living in Europe and led to an agricultural-based society. They also gave the peasants more power while taking away power from the nobles. The heretical change led to drastic economic and political changes in Europe.